Good evening, everyone. My name is Thane Rosenbaum. I'm the creative director of the Forum on Life, Culture, and Society at Touro College. And welcome to the FOLCS film series. Tonight's film, in honor of International Women's Day, a film that has been produced and has debuted on the OWN network. OWN is the Oprah Winfrey Network. The film is Invisible Portraits. It is a film that does so many things and does it so well. It is in some ways a film about the legacy of slavery on Black women. But in addition to that, it's about the empowerment of Black women, the soulfulness of Black women, the sisterly solidarity of Black women, the perseverance, the resilience. It accomplishes so much in such an artful way. The film has already debuted on OWN. Some of you have seen it with us in a screening. On March 13th, you can watch it on OWN as well at noon Pacific time. I think if you go on our chat button, we'll give you other ways. I think there's the OWN app. It's going to be, I think, streamed on the Discovery Channel. So there are many opportunities to see this film, and we're going to give it some life today, and you'll surely be inspired to watch this. Joining us tonight, we have the film's director, Oge Egbuonu, the president of OWN, Tina Perry, a visual artist who appears in the film, Victoria Cassinova, a social scientist who appears in the film, Dr. Joy DeGruy, and the author, Iyanla Vanzant. And Iyanla she gets a double dip on OWN because she actually has her own show, I think, on OWN. So we're plugging both her appearance on the film, and we're asking you to go watch her on her own show on OWN. Look, we have a full house tonight of dynamic women of color on a very special day, International Women's Day, on behalf of a really wonderful film. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, it's always a large audience on Facebook. Welcome. We appreciate it. Like us, comment freely, come on our website, give us your email address so we can notify you about upcoming events. If you have any questions for Oge or Tina or Victoria or Joy or Iyanla, you can leave it on the Q&A button. And so let's start. Welcome. Thank you all. So I want to just start off by saying I am not unmindful to the fact that I am the only male here tonight, and I happen to be a white male on International Women's Day, and I'm with 5 charismatic, dynamic African-American women. So please, in the spirit of openness and intellectual honesty, if I screw up in any way and say the wrong thing, just tell me. Just jump right in. Say, Thane, you just said something that a white man would say. And in fact, I have something to confess later in this show that you'll say, I need some advice from 5 dynamic, charismatic African-American women. Also, there's so many of you, and you're all so impressive. I'm really here in true spirit to listen. I want to listen to you. So you should feel free to interrupt each other if you need to, ask questions of each other. So welcome all. Let's start with the title of the film, Oge. There's a paradox because it's invisible. It's both visible and invisible. But frankly, this movie, although it speaks to a history of invisibility, the people that are in this film, the courage, the strength, the dynamism of them, this really, to me, is a showcase of visibility, extraordinary visibility. And I'm wondering whether you think that there's that's part of the paradox in the art that you and Tina have produced. And also, I'm just sort of curious, as a male, is this speaking to a strength of female Black empowerment that would be very different if expressed through the lens of African-American men?
Yeah, so the title came about, and the reason why the IN is in parentheses is because I feel like this society does a really great job of trying to erase the contributions of Black women to this country and this world. When in essence, when we're talking about America in particular, this country was built off the backs of Black women. And so as much as this country tries to erase our existence and perpetuate myths that dehumanize us, I wanted this to serve as an invitation and as a love letter to Black women and as a reminder that our story doesn't end in defeat and that our story ends in victory. So the I in was very intentional in the sense that this country tries to erase us,
Yeah.
but in essence, it can't do that because, like I said, it was built off the backs of Black women. And it really,
Tina, this is on your network. You produce this. This is also your baby. Is that how you feel as well about what you're here to promote and discuss?
Well, I can't take credit for producing this. Oge produced this documentary all on her own. We had the privilege of seeing it before another network bought it, and we bought it. So I can tell you that, as a buyer and having the privilege to distribute it and share it with as many people as possible, we heard her intention behind the film, and which is what she's describing here now with you. And we were definitely moved by the notion of, wanting to talk about that invisibility that not everyone kind of owns, that erasing that can happen, and also the challenging journey that Black women have been on in this country. She did it in such a poetic, beautiful way, but with so many scholars and really rooted in kind of experiences, but also research. So once we heard what she was doing, we knew it was a perfect fit for our brand and for our audience. And it's a special piece of work. There's been a lot done like this.
It is. You use the word poetry. The film is interesting. There's a lot of art. This is a film with very big aspirations. It's not just a documentary, as I said. It's that, and it's so much more. There's poetry, there's music, there's visual arts. There is the discussion of music and visual arts by many of the people in the film. I'm wondering, and any of you can speak about this, but certainly Oge, is there something that you think that's particularly unique about the singularity of the African-American female experience that is effective in telling that story through a multidisciplined way or multidimensional way of using art in this creative form?
Yeah, well, I'll let some of the ladies talk about it, but I know my intention behind doing it that way is that I wanted to create something that felt like a love letter to Black women. And so when I was thinking about ways that I embrace love, or what makes me feel like I'm reading or embodying a love letter, was through music, was through poetry and through art. And so I incorporated that in the way that I told this story, because at the end of the day, this is a meditation, right? It's an offering to Black women to say, I see you, I hear you, and you matter. And so I wanted to create something that felt like a love note to Black women and Black girls.
Joy, you've published a book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and in the film, you really, I think it's very eye-opening, everything that you said, frankly. And you talk about intergenerational and multi-generational trauma, as if to say that white America should not feel that much better about themselves with the end of slavery, because the trauma continued. I think you say at some point, there's sort of the pretense of a level playing field, but that's certainly not true, nor has it been true from Jim Crow, and then even now in Black Lives Matter. We aren't really in a post-racial society, are we, even after 2 terms of an African-American president?
Correct. I mean, I think that I love what Oge said about this whole idea of the art and the music and the history, because you see all of it is part of who we are. So it in a way it can't not be there, because it's what has gotten us where we are. These are integral to the African-American experience, to the culture, to the heart, to the spirit of Blackness. And I think what I love so much about this film is you have women speaking truth in a way that it's palatable, because it's honest, it's right in your face, and yet it's so intensely full of love, so intensely full of hope, but also very, very, I think, defiant, in the sense that no one gets to name me or to write my narrative.
Well, the way you've described it and the way the film lays it out, when we see the endless, repetitive abuse that extended beyond slavery, I'm just wondering, because it's still for people for people like myself, it is just so impossible to imagine that this is what this country once did. It's just, for me, I'm so mortified, by this. When I think about it, it's just I've been a human rights law professor for years, and it is just so mortifying. And I'm just wondering, just to speak about the trauma of slavery, had slavery ended and had white America said, we are mortified, we are sorry, here are restitution payments, we are going to treat you like the best arrivals to Ellis Island from now on, right? And there was no Jim Crow, and Reconstruction worked fabulously, and everything. We have to still accept the fact that trauma would have been there intergenerationally, because slavery, the impact of that was so immense. Is that correct?
But you're speaking about it as if it's not still there.
Exactly.
And I think that one of the major beautiful points that Oge made in this film, and that Dr. Joy spoke to, is that it's still there. I experienced it last Tuesday. The fact that I'm on OWN, or that I have a television show, or that I have a master's degree, a law degree, an ABD, doesn't matter when my black face shows up in a way in this world that trauma, that triggers something in someone else. So it's still going on. And the reason, I heard you say you're mortified, and you can acknowledge that. But the reason it continues to go on is because the country at large refuses to acknowledge it. And until we tell the truth, none of us will be free. Until we stare it in the face and call it what it is, because it still exists. Now today it's showing up as laws for voter suppression. And so it's still here. And I think one of the things that the film did for me is it highlighted and it showed not just the physical oppression, but it spoke to the spiritual oppression that Black women have experienced and continue to experience. And the power and the beauty of it is that the music and the art was the way that we got our story told. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Strange fruit. These things, here's to life. I mean, the things that Black women have been able to sing, that when white America embraces it, then they decolorize you. So that they don't have to look at the ways that they've oppressed you. They decolorize Pearl Bailey or Ella Fitzgerald or Beyonce. They get decolorized once white America embraces them, so that our story doesn't have to be told. I'll be quiet now.
No, don't be quiet. It's wonderful. My point was only to say that if everything had gone right, the trauma would have still been there.
Slavery wasn't right.
Right? No, I know that. I'm not saying. I'm saying even if.
So it was downhill from there, beloved. It was going downhill.
Anti-Blackness was alive and well. Anti-Blackness was alive and well around the world, and so I think. It's so amazing because we synchronize. You were saying exactly what I was going to say, Iyanla, because again, there is this, part of the mythology is that somehow, where are we really? I mean, some people think we're on the brink of a race war right now, Right now. So it's not something that's far from us. And at the same time, I think, surely had there not been the kind of behaviors that continue to re-injure and injure us to this day, there would have been an opportunity to heal. It's hard to heal when someone is still hitting you.
Right.
Yes.
People tell us, get over the past. Well, I will when it becomes past, okay? Because it's not past yet. And so I think we have to take a look at this from a lens of reality. And the reality is, each one of us, and I know the Black women here know that we move through the world differently. It doesn't matter, how many degrees you have, doesn't matter. You have this hostile environment. And the good news is the rest of the world is seeing what we've already seen. We've always known. The rest of the world is leaning in and going, wait a minute, shame on you, America. But this is not new. And I said before that part of I I guess I felt a bit insulted when I heard people say, "Oh my God, you know, when the thing happened at the Capitol, well, this is not America." Yes, it is.
I know.
So there's an interesting thing that comes up early in the film, and it reminded me almost immediately after the Michael Brown killing, when it's sort of the early days of Black Lives Matter movement. I remember I was watching cable news and an African-American woman held up a sign, and she wrote, I wrote this down, I think she says, "Why is this shit still happening?" That was her sign. Which I just thought said everything that needed to be said, right? Why is this shit still happening? And one of the things that's interesting about the film is that it starts on this idea of the angry Black woman as that both a stereotype, but yet something that shouldn't be rejected because it makes sense that it's true.
Yeah.
That African-American women have reasons to be angry. Can we speak about that? I can tell you why I'm asking, because a number of years ago, we did an event with a show on television called Shots Fired that dealt with two different shootings. And when I was on stage with the cast, I said something about one of the actresses, I think Sana Lathan. I said, you know, you're in some ways playing the role of an angry Black woman. And a lot of the audience members just really were upset that I used that word, that phrase, as if it was an inappropriate thing to say. And, you know, she was saying, yes, it's true, I am sort of playing that role. So can we talk about, because this film is so filled with soulfulness and spirit, but it begins on this idea that given everything that's happened, what else would you expect but anger?
Well, go ahead, Oge, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, what is another word for angry? Why isn't it, that's how we have to defend ourselves? Why isn't it, that's what the demarcations that have been made on our soul? Why isn't it that we are outraged? Why isn't it that we are terrified? Helen Jones in this movie was terrified. I'm terrified. Why does it have to be angry? And why is it that when our face is on it, it's bad? What about angry white men who tore the Capitol up? What about that?
I think Iyanla's making an incredible point because, you know, at OWN, we really pride ourselves as showing the multiple dimensions to a Black woman, all sides, all images, all representations. We try to stay away from the stereotypes and the tropes that we've dealt with all of our lives and throughout our generations. And I think the notion of an angry Black woman has been a stereotype and something that's been placed on us as how we are and we all can be. And I think Iyanla is pointing out a really good point that, you know, the notion of an angry Black man or an angry Latina woman, that's not a prevalent stereotype or trope in our society. And I know that I really loved how this film opened up and explored that, because if you are not a Black woman, oftentimes you may not understand the sensitivity or confusion for us when we hear people think of it that way. And I just know I love that it was explored, but she continued with the film to talk about the other dimensions of Black women, of our culture, of our community, of our expression, of our challenges, of our strengths, what we've gone through. So it's an interesting question you're raising. And I think, Iyanla, you've really nailed it on the head that it's not properly explored often, but I'm not surprised that on your panel, there was the reaction you received.
Yeah, no, I was schooled that night.
Yeah, I think also too, though, you have to understand that what we're up against is an ideology, right? Like that is what we're fighting up against, is a belief system, right? And the belief system is literally white supremacy, right? Which is rooted in the essence of most institutions and the media in this country and in this world. And so it does a really great job of dehumanizing us, right? And for me, this documentary was an offering to rehumanize not only Black folks, but Black women. Because at the end of the day, we are always experiencing the imagination of someone else. And this society, this American society, is literally the imagination of old white men. And it gives you a clear insight into the mental health of old white men, right? At one point in time, we were considered 3/5 of a human being. Right? That gives you insight into the mental health of the people that were putting that legislation together. And so what we're up against, and I think until people really start to understand that, this isn't a physical thing. Like, you know, like, yes, we want to dismantle these systems and these institutions, but at the end of the day, like what we're trying to shift is the ideology that these systems were inherently rooted in and built upon. That's why we always keep saying, especially in movement space now, reimagine something different, right? And I think the beauty of what's happening right now, if anything beautiful is to come out the past year and a half, is the fact that people are recognizing that they're basically refamiliarizing themselves with their voice, and they're realizing that all the things that we've been conditioned to believe to be true are not immutable truths. Right? And at the end of the day, like, so many veils are being lifted right now, where people are starting to question all the things we've been taught to be true, right? So many people questioning our government, right? So many people questioning the schooling institution, right? Like, so many things are up in question right now. I think that's a beautiful space to be in, because at this moment in time, we are all I think in a space where we're trying to reimagine something completely different, because we understand that what we're up against is an ideology and a belief system.
Thane, can I just offer one more thing, Thane? Let me just say one more thing. Thane, it's also used as a way to shut us down, because we are taught you can't be angry. You need to be grateful. And that's bad. That's wrong. So if somebody wants to shut a Black woman down, the first thing they'll do is dismiss her by, oh, you're just another angry Black woman. So that's another reason I will now.
There's a piece here that I think is really important. And that is, even I've had students, I've taught at the university for over 20 years. And I would have a student, I didn't expect my professor to be so angry. I went, angry? I said, you have not seen angry. Okay. No part of angry has shown up in my classroom. So this is interpreted. And let me put this in perspective. You know, the first person that raises their voice in white culture, you know, loses. The first one that raises their voice. So I may be signing your death warrant, but we're not going to lose our decorum.
Right.
You see, I'm going to, oh, yes, you know, but, you know, I followed protocol, Joy, and, you know, you just got to go. And I'm sorry, I might have to take off the earrings, okay? Because that's not okay with me. And the fact that I assert myself, the fact that I have passion, the fact that my volume of my voice lowers and gets higher and everything in between does not mean that I'm angry. You know, it means I'm me. And it means that I show up this way and get to. But again, when we've already decided I can sign your death warrant without even raising my voice, then what is your expectation of me, who the person you're killing? And so I think that there's this also this notion of appropriateness, how you're supposed to show up as a woman, how you're supposed to show up if you feel some kind of way. And I think that we use, again, it gets centered in whiteness around how we even interpret those things.
Yeah.
Megan spoke about that this morning, did she not? Did not Megan speak about that this morning? Hello.
Yeah, she did. So speaking, going back to cultural stereotypes, film sets out sort of three that refer specifically to women. One is what's called the Mammy stereotype, which is sort of a white person's fantasy of the really kind housekeeper, so to speak, or, you know, the Aunt Jemima stereotype. And then they talk about the Jezebel stereotype, is the exploitation, the sexualization of African-American women that starts in the plantation, right? There's this extraordinary piece in the film that really discusses, and we'll hopefully get to some of that tonight as well. And then the last is the welfare queen. I want to start with the Mammy one. One of you said, interestingly, no Black woman wants to be Mammy. I love that line. I don't know which of you said it, but it was great. But I just want to not push back, of course, because I'm so incredibly humbled here tonight.
That won't work.
But yeah, I just want to say this about Aunt Jemima. I just want to know, I think of in culture, in popular culture, The Help. There was a show years ago, I'll Fly Away, Driving Miss Daisy. In these portrayals, that character that is a stereotype is also the kindest hearted, the wisest, the most loving, the most sensible, the smartest. I'm just wondering that in your mind, in the world of cancel culture, is that a stereotype that is just, it's irredeemable. It's simply demeaning and racist, and there's really no good can come out of it. You want to look about a movie, look at Hidden Figures about African-American scientists, mathematicians, look at, you know, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, right? But I don't want to see The Help, right? I'm just wondering, you know, this is on the OWN network. Oprah Winfrey is so synonymous with American culture. So I think this is an interesting way of looking at these films that are generally very sympathetically viewed.
So I'll jump in on this. I'll say one thing, which is, so it's interesting the films you chose and the characters you're talking about, they're being portrayed in this media content. And what they have in common is they're all of service to others.
Yeah.
They're all in service to white people.
Exactly.
And it's one thing if they were the next door neighbor owning their house too, with all this kindness and intelligence and fantastic.
And they raise the children. They actually take over the job that the kids were raised by African-American women.
Still in a secondary subservient role.
Yeah.
Being paid less, being told what to do, living on other sides of town, being treated unfairly consistently. And, you know, media for decades and decades has been part of the problem, you know, of presenting these as singular portrayals of Black people's lives and as women. And as much as they are real stories that happen, we have so many other stories and histories and characters that you could portray and show. And it's
you're saying there's no surprise that white America actually likes those portrayals, right? No. And they oftentimes win Academy Awards, right?
There's certainly been a conscious choice to keep making those characters and to keep rewarding them.
Right.
And rewarding films that make them.
I think language is really important, right? We need to get back to that. Language is very important. And one thing that Toni Morrison said is that definitions are for the definers and not the defined. You have to start asking yourself, white America, why is the mammy needed, right? Like, why is that role needed? And do you really think that Black women who portray those roles or who were forced into those roles really enjoy doing that? Right? Like I think we have to really start re-examining history and asking really hard questions because I'm actually quite perplexed by the stories that you chose to highlight that, because even like Viola Davis came out, I believe at one point, was it last year or maybe a few months ago, actually in regret of playing that role in The Help.
Well, right? That's why I'm asking you.
This narrative that dehumanizes us, right? The role of the mammy is a dehumanizing role, right?
Right, all right.
You're taking away a Black mother from her family to nurture and care for yours, leaving her kids abandoned and not cared for and not nurtured for, which perpetuates the trauma that we talked about earlier on. So I think it's really about examining and asking harder questions on like why we feel that definition is even necessary. And why place Black women in those roles. It kind of goes back to Zora Neale Hurston, when she talks about Black women being perceived as the mules of the world, right? Which Dr. Joy DeGruy talks so greatly about in the documentary.
Yeah.
Can I say
those are incredible answers. Anyone else want to join in there?
Here, I know why white people like mammies, because mammies are inauthentic. Because if we look at Just The Help, this was a phenomenal writer. She was a writer, but she had to play down and dumb down to make her massa and her missus comfortable. The same thing with the character, the cook, the one that fried the good chicken. She had to play down and dumb down.
Octavia Spencer.
And white America loves the appearance. This is what Megan was talking about this morning. It won't look good. So the mammy lives up to the fantasy of what white folk think Black folks should be. So they like her. They like her inauthenticity. They like her subservience. They love that. That's why they like the mammy.
And I just want to say one thing on that we're really clear. A mammy is not a nanny.
Right. That's right. That's the different expectation.
So you're saying right that even my distinction is wrong. No, the difference between mammy and the films that I chose.
100%. Like, you know, when like that's where the confusion I think happens when people are thinking about telling these stories. I think you've demonstrated in this panel, you know what I mean, of just where you kind of compartmentalized these women. And what you kind of described to me is like a nanny in a household, Mary Poppins. That is not who these women are in any of these films. She's not educated. She is not paid like Mary Poppins. She doesn't get to dress like her. Mary Poppins was never spit on and given food that had feces in it. And she wasn't, do you know what I mean? Done all these terrible, just, it's not the same.
Thank you. I really appreciated hearing those
Dr. Joyce will say something.
I think the other thing that I try to do, and I'm always trying to look at what is happening presently that really is really speaking to the same kind of behavior. For example, I do work with organizations, schools, and individuals all around the world. And one of the things that people will say to me is, "Oh, Dr. Joy, we have an equity lens. We're looking at intersectionality. They got all the right words." All the right words are there. And in the end, they're saying to me, we want to be reflective of the people we're trying to serve. So I'm trying to wait to hear what they're saying. They said, so we're going to hire more people of color. And I asked them, I said, so, and who's going to do that? This is what we are. I said, what makes you think you're going to be able to do it? I said, because let me tell you who you're going to choose based on the data and based on the research. You're going to choose the Black person, the Indigenous person, the Latina person that is most willing to subdue their natural cultural reality to make you feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. Whether you know that consciously or unconsciously, that's who you hire. You hire the person that's most willing to not be their full and authentic selves and are more in alignment with what you believe and what you feel and what makes you comfortable. And those people then become gatekeepers. Well, they look like us, but they basically respond in a way that make white people comfortable. And the mammy makes me feel safe, makes me feel comfortable. I cannot look at you as an equal or a peer. That is a threatening position. And we need to know that this is showing up. That's not just a mammy. That shows up. We'll walk in the room and go, I can ask the women on this call. How many women on this call have met Black people that say they're not Black? Right? Exactly. You find that person, and those are the person that get set up. They become the gatekeepers and they do harm. But again, I think white people gravitate to that, the comfortable, the safe person, as though we're the ones to be afraid of. Right. And it's amazing to me that we project all of this angry, violent, but look at who's angry and violent. The greatest fear that white people have has existed since the end of slavery. They're going to all get together and kill us for what we did. They're going to all get together and kill us for what we did. And in reality, the opposite is true. The opposite is true. We're trying to do our lives. And you have white people creating a vigilante gang that has, to date, 2021, the greatest threat to America is white supremacy. That's from the FBI and Homeland Security. So we know why is it we are always projecting these images that aren't real. They're not true. And when you pull the covers back, who pushed whom first? Just saying.
Well said. Let's talk a moment about the Jezebel cultural stereotype. I was really struck by, I guess, the number I never heard before. 600,000 mixed-raced babies were born out of the plantation experience. 600,000 people. And so the thinking about the exploitation of the Black female body to be, I think that the film speaks of the language of to be sexually accessible to the slave owners and his or her friends. Astonishing. But yet the film does something very interesting. In doing that, it then moves to Henrietta Lacks, because that's a different kind of exploitation, right? So I thought it was a very subtle, Oge, I thought it was really subtle and well done to say there's one that looks just terribly violent, and then there's this other one where a woman's cells, taken without her consent, ends up advancing human progress and medical science. And how is that not an exploitation? And one of you in the film, again, I'm sorry, I can't remember who, wisely says something like, how, given the fact that she has given so much to humanity, can't you see her humanity? Yeah. So I thought maybe we can talk a little about this Jezebel concept, because it is much more complex than most people think about. Victoria, we haven't heard from Judith yet.
I was going to have Joy go, because you're quoting Joy in that, Dr. Joy DeGruy, she says that in the documentary.
I think that the sexualizing of women. For example, one of the things that, one of the questions I asked in my course is, during this time, the 1800s moving forward, it wasn't even possible for a Black woman to be raped. They said that their sexual engagement is by nature promiscuous. And then when asked to produce evidence of it, how do you know? They're lustful, they're immoral, provocative, all of these things. And then when they said, well, what is your evidence? Now stay with me. Their protruding buttocks and genitals are evident. The butt. So you're saying the big butt, because they got a big butt, that means you slut, you tramp, you whore. Look at that butt. The butt, by the way, that, well, everyone wants right now, the one that you could buy online, the one that the people get injected, right? So it's interesting that they pathologize the Black body. They rape Black women and say, oh, you got raped because you're immoderate, lustful, and immoral. And look at your butt. There's an example of it. I mean, how twisted can that be? But how convenient it is to say it's your fault that you were raped. It's your fault. You are by nature promiscuous. Do you see? These are all things. I mean, I guess, that is a white man's heaven to believe that. And at the same time, you have our bodies that everyone seems to despise, but can't keep their hands off of.
Just briefly, does anyone want to say that given everything that Henrietta has done for the world, that the continued use of those cells, which I understand were even used in the development of the COVID-19 vaccine, is a continued exploitation and injustice, a perpetuation of what was already a crime?
Absolutely. Victoria, were you trying to say something?
No, I was going back to like just the butt thing. The butt thing made me think about how, like, if you look at our culture today, like, for example, I'm Black and Puerto Rican. I grew up feeling like I was never beautiful, or that I went to school. I went to school with mostly white kids. It's just where my parents planted me. And I went to school with my hair tied up in a bun like this, because I was so ashamed of the fact that I had curly hair. I wanted straight hair. I had no one to like look up to besides like Beyonce and at the time Rihanna. And then I was like, oh, I can wear this color, like little things like that. But as like a young Black girl, I like never grew up thinking I was beautiful. And then now jump to today, like there's a constant cultural appropriation of Black beauty trends that excludes us from the narrative at the same time, whether it's historical relevance of braids or cornrows being whitewashed by like the Kardashians, which I find it mind-blowing that like we have the Kardashians with the butts and the lips and the braids, and it's like that's ours, but yet we're ridiculed for having like quote ghetto acrylic nails that are now being praised on white celebrities or runways. And there's like this grotesque dichotomy of the Black aesthetic being fetishized and lusted over when they're on racially ambiguous people or white faces, but then while it's on Black people, it's like excluded. Like we're invisible. Like we're in, I don't know, that just really, it angers me. That's another reason for I think anger is that not only what our minds and our empowerment and our integrity stripped away from us from history, but our physical appearance and us feeling comfortable in our skin. And that's what I also wanted to convey in the painting that's in the documentary as well, is like us as Black women facing each other and breaking through this glass to see our beauty, because I know what it's like to grow up feeling, I didn't feel really attractive until like my early 20s when I finally became more comfortable with my hair and I figured out the right hair products, and there's a whole world of figuring out Black girl products and curly hair stuff. But like, it's unbelievable how this whole time I was like, dang, I could have felt pretty this whole time. But you know, the media and the world around me told me I wasn't pretty.
And I want the audience to keep in mind that actually what you just heard from Victoria, but her art is actually in the film. And what I said earlier about the way so many different ideas and artistic ideas and disciplines are, employed to tell this story. Victoria's art is a part of that. Somebody says in the film, we don't even have the power to protect our children. Again, I can't remember who that was, but I want to go back to something Joy said earlier, which is this sort of bizarre, twisted white paranoia that white people are in danger of Black people. And there was this very strong moment in the film, and I was very struck by it because as a law professor, I've taught in a course, Law and Literature, To Kill a Mockingbird for probably 25 years. And people forget the significance of the trial scene where the fact that Tom Robinson runs away is evidence of guilt, because why would a Black person who's innocent run, right? And of course, from the perspective of an Alabama white person, yeah, why would an innocent person run? But I think it was Joy or several people in the film said, are you kidding? A glance, a Black man in the presence of a white woman could lead to a lynching. Anything could go wrong. The wrong glance, the wrong thing, don't do this, I don't do that. And so of course Tom Robinson left. And we don't really fled the scene of this, alleged, rape. So again, I was very struck by that because that's a very powerful idea. Can we talk about this idea of endangerment and how that plays into all sorts of things? Because even the policing, slave patrols, law enforcement that now we see in the movement Black Lives Matter.
Can I give an example?
Yes.
2020 on a major airline leaving Washington, D.C., myself and my 50-year-old son. First class seats. We get on the plane. He's sitting in one row, I'm sitting in another. We're the only two flies in the soup bowl. Only two Black people in first class. Major airline, 2020. And they went to him and asked him for his boarding pass. And I said, if he shows you his boarding pass, I'm going to have a middle passage moment. And this plane is not taking off.
I'm sorry,
it's not
that was
taking
just
off. I will be in the aisle ripping the chains off. 2020, 2019, young white flight attendant on a major airline. My son is, he's straight out of Brooklyn. And the flight attendant asked him something. Apparently she didn't like his response. When we landed at our destination, they had the flight marshals there. The air marshals. She said that he had threatened her. And when she approached him, I stepped in front of him because I knew with the air marshals outside the plane, if he said the wrong thing in the wrong tone, in the wrong way, it was not going to turn out well for him. Me, they will accommodate and dismiss to a certain amount. I can have a little bit of hysteria. This is Iyanla Vanzant on the Oprah Winfrey Network, multiple Emmys, multiple NAACP awards, multiple bank accounts, multiple degrees. And it didn't make a damn bit of difference in 2019 and 2020 because my son is seen as a danger. He's not seen as the butterfly that people will, he's immediately seen as the bumblebee, and the anticipation of his sting will make people swat at him before he even opens his wings. 2020.
Wow. Faith comes up in the film in a very powerful way. Two things that I was very struck by. One is faith because, you could make the argument that despite all evidence to the contrary, right, the stories here were so dependent on faith that brought African American women through this entire Western experience of being in America. Jesus loves me. I think that was even mentioned in the, and I want someone maybe to speak to that. Also this idea of the admiration that African American women routinely, universally show for their mothers and grandmothers. That this is a sense of respect. If they, when asked who they admire the most, it's always the legacy of the women that came before them. So are those two of the secret sauce of how women have been able to manage with such degree of perseverance, resilience, and dignity?
Well, when we couldn't read and we couldn't speak, it was our spirit. It was the tenacity of our spirit. It was our deep faith in something greater than us that got us through. And usually it was grandma or auntie or big mama or my dear that taught you how to tap into that spirit, how to tap into that strength, how to tap into that faith, whether it's by what they said or by what they did. My grandmother was a Native American, and she was a domestic worker. I watched her get up for years and go clean people's houses and cook their food. And she used to bring us the leftovers and the thrown away clothes. And she was 5'10", and she was a substantial woman. But when she got dressed and starched her clothes out the refrigerator, the level of dignity that she carried, you would never know how dehumanized she was every day in Yonkers and White Plains for the people she worked with. So yeah, it is our spirit, our faith, and grandma. Yeah.
Anyone else on that? Because it's such a big part of the film. Also, I know that we talked about, I found it interesting, music was such, in terms of the expressive art, it does seem like that was, especially when speaking to younger African-American women, music played a big role in what it was that it moved them, inspired them. Is there something about that we can say that is, part of the singular African-American female experience? Again, sisterly bonds, faith, music.
I think that's an African American. It's beyond just women. It is part of who we are. It is the drum. And I think that when I think about spirituality, when I think about my grandmother and my mother and my aunt and literally all the women in my life, that what they exude, there's a quiet knowing. And I talk about this a lot because our children have it and they get punished for it. They get punished for being able to feel their way through. They get punished because they can read your behavior. Well, at 5, at 4, they can read you and they can determine the sincerity in your heart. And they get punished for that. This child, how dare they? But they can tell, which is why they come home and say, my teacher doesn't like me. Because they can feel that. And I think that is something that has been transmitted. Some people have a theory that advanced ability to read, to see what is before us, is something that had to come with having to be intuitive about what the master was doing. Now, I don't believe that at all. I think it's intrinsic to our Africanness. I think it's intrinsic to Blackness, to have that spirit and that quiet spirit where and everybody on this call, I can guarantee you that if we were in the same room, that we could communicate without a word.
It's so interesting that you would say that too, Joy, because your book is about inherited trauma, but you're saying this is different. This is not about an inheritance from slavery. This is just intrinsic to who we are as Africans.
It's intrinsic to who we are, and that spirit. All you gotta do is go to Africa. I've been in 7 countries in Africa, and I have people who. One of the things that I share in my book is I talk about the first time I went to Africa, which I was toe up the whole time I was there. I cried a lot when I was in Africa. And if I can briefly kind of tell the story, because I think it's a powerful one. When I went to Africa, it was the very first time I went to the southern regions of Africa, South Africa, right on the heels of the inauguration of Nelson Mandela. And when I arrived there was just, I cried a lot because it was the first time I felt a certain level of Black normalcy. And when the people would talk to you, because these are tribal language, I don't understand what they're saying, but they're speaking to me, and every translation of where we would go, hey, how you doing, what's up? They're saying, I see you. The literal translation was, I see you. And they say that verbally as a greeting. And I remember, just, coming back home and being in this space where, and I think it's in The Color Purple was where I saw this happen. But this whole idea of I see you, we still do that. We do that on the street when we do that nod. We do that in the grocery store with 2 Black women look at each other and know what's getting ready to go on next to them. That knowing that I'm talking about is a spiritual thing. It's a spiritual reality. There's nothing, it's not composed of anything. So therefore it won't decompose. That's spirit. And that is something that has been given to us and that I saw all throughout Africa with people who could not even speak my name. We couldn't say it, but yet we could communicate because what they were saying to me was, Joy, I see you, which is what Invisible Portraits is saying, you will see us.
I actually think, I love that you said that, Joy, because I was just about to say that African Americans that tune in either on OWN or Discovery Channel, or any other streaming service or apps, I see you is, what their experience as the commonality of an African American, the singularity of it, they will see the visibility of it. But I'm wondering whether Oge or Tina as well could speculate what the film, you think, if at all, what it says, how it speaks to white people. I want to believe that white people will be watching this on OWN. I want them to. I would encourage them to. You'll be a better white person for it, I'll tell you that. But I'm wondering whether any of you would like to weigh in on what do you think it says to them, or what there should be their takeaway.
Well, I want to let Oge talk about what white people would take away from her film. I'm going to make one point going back to the I see you comment that Dr. Joy shared. The brand moniker at OWN is see yourself. That's what we tell our viewers. See yourself on OWN. And if you think about that, we're telling our viewers, I see you. And when you come here, you're going to see people that look like you, like your friends, your sisters. You're going to see Iyanla talking to families and mothers and sons and daughters about their problems that you're going to identify with, or helping them get to the other side. You're going to see men that remind you of men in your life. You're going to see conversations that remind you of your culture and our history. See yourself. And so I think that's such a powerful conversation you just had, Dr. Joy, what you just shared, because it really is intrinsic and a core of like our culture and our community. But I'm going to turn it over to Oge, because I think she's the best person to answer that question.
Well, but one question I want to add to that point is, does that mean that African Americans, when they see this film, they really understand what Oge said in the beginning about visible and invisible? Right, that they really intuitively, or Joy would say, of course, it's intrinsic to an African American is, and that, of course, Thane, the white guy, stumbled immediately with visible and invisible, because I'm not African American, and I'm not a African American female. I love that in the way you described that. That's what Oprah Winfrey Network actually is addressing. That's how it communicates its overall message. Oge, white people watching this film?
I often say that my intention in making this film, first and foremost, is for Black women and girls. And that intention is for this to feel like a love letter to them. And then secondly, I feel like the documentary serves as a re-education to everyone else, right? Like, this documentary is an entry point. It isn't the end all be all about the Black woman's experience in America, right? Because we're not a monolith, right? We have Black trans women, right? Like, we have Black disabled women. There's so many other aspects to Black womanhood. And so this documentary very much so is an entry point. But when it comes to white folks and what I hope they take away from it, I really hope that they do the work, right? Like, it's not our jobs to consistently educate you on the problem that you all have created. When I say you all, I mean white supremacy, right? I mean the ideology of whiteness, right? The project of whiteness, which is what America is, right? It's not my job, or none of our jobs, to consistently educate you on the issues at hand. So I would hope that white folks will see this documentary and it serves as an entry point for them to start to do the internal work, right? And it kind of goes back to what Gil Scott-Heron said, where he said, the revolution won't be televised, right? He didn't mean that it won't be on TV. He means that it has to be an internal revolution first before you see it externally. So I can come up here all day long and educate you on the injustices that Black women experience, that Black folks experience. But if you're not doing the internal work to really address how you show up in that, it doesn't matter, right? That, to me, why I actually have an issue with the whole idea of like diversity and inclusion, right? You can add as many Black folks and brown folks to a system all you want to. It's not sustainable, right? Because the system is inherently rotten, right? You can't implement me into a system that is inherently built to suppress me and oppress me, right? And so I hope that white folks that see this documentary would actually do the work, instead of putting it on our shoulders to educate them and consistently educate them on the issues and the injustices that we experience. So as far as a takeaway, the only one that I have is that they start to ask harder questions and they start to do the internal work. What comes from that? I don't have expectations on that.
You know, it's a wonderful answer, but it depresses me, Oge, because I don't think you think in your heart that enough white people want to do the work. Or
No,
will?
I think in my heart, I understand what I'm up against is a belief system, right?
Yeah.
Like that is literally what we are up against. And until you do the internal work, it doesn't change, right? And in order for you to change a belief system, there has to be internal work that is done, right? That's how you can have so many white folks posting black squares during the summer of 2020 and then not literally doing any other work after that, right? That's performative allyship, right? And that's not what we need, right? We need solidarity. I need you in the trenches with me. I need you side by side with me. And so that's what I mean. Like it's not, like, yeah, it could be depressing, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to do the work. You can read as many books as you want to, right? If the revolution isn't happening internally, it doesn't matter, right? That we'll consistently keep experiencing the same thing over and over and over again, right? It kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, how history keeps repeating itself, right? Civil rights happened, right? You're like, oh, it's over with. Slavery happened and slavery ended. Oh, it's over with. It's like, no, because we're still up against a belief system. It just transformed, right? It literally reformed, right? That's how you have the prison system, right? That's how you have policing. Like, it's not about it ending, right? Because in order for it to end, the belief system has to end. And so I'm very clear on what I'm up against, which is why I'm not like, oh, like I want you to walk away and do this, because I know no matter what my expectations are, unless it happens internally first, then it doesn't matter what I want you to take away from it. I want you to actually do the work.
Please tell me, Oge, that you just invented the term of art, performative allyship, because I just love that. Did you just do that, or did I miss that?
No, that's a very well-known phrase, especially in movement space, right?
I'm sorry. I just love that. So thank you for teaching me that, performative allyship. But that's an important point, right? Because that just talks not just about, it's very complicated, right? We are living in an era of higher, deeper levels of sensitivity about privilege, white privilege. And the people who have white people who believe with all sincerity that they should speak the language, or more importantly, listening because of the recognition of white privilege, they still stumble, right? And I would say that still some of them are actually performing performative allyship that isn't really the work that I think you think is necessary. And I'm wondering that, because we're living in these very delicate times, I'm just wondering whether the people that are actually think they're doing the work in a way aren't ever going to go deep enough.
Well, I can jump in and just share one thing that I found helpful on panels like this is to call out what the work is. I think we all know what the work is, what Oge's saying. But what is the work? The work is when you're in a conversational circle with white people and you hear something racist said, something unjust said, something that sounds like profiling or stereotype, you say something and call it out. You don't sit there and laugh and roll your eyes. Mm-hmm. You're in a work environment that doesn't have diversity. It's about being an employee and talking to your senior managers and other people and figuring out how can we change the environment, right? What can you do? There's plenty of places to donate. We all know about the protests and marches. There's all kind of laws you can vote on around the country on all types of issues that can help. I mean, I think other people on this call on this Zoom call can probably say other forms of work, right? That in addition to reading and educating yourself and thinking about the issues, but just saying you're an ally isn't going to be enough. There's a lot of action and activity you have to take if you really believe you want to help eradicate the problem that we've been living with. And I think that's just something for everyone should keep in mind.
Tina, that is a great takeaway. So thank you for that. Let's take one question from the audience and we'll say goodnight to all of you. And again, thank you so much for teaching me and for your presence and dignity and dynamism. And really, you made the film go acoustic for a moment in a very different way. And I appreciated seeing it. And I'm once again, for the audience, we usually have a global audience. Find a way to see this movie. It'll change you. You'll be a better person for it. Here's a question it's a long one, but any one of you can jump in. This person says, they aren't even, and I'm not sure, I guess we'll intuit who they is. They aren't even trying to hide their naked racism behind voter suppression anymore. Does the fact that there are women like Stacey Abrams that successfully combated this in this last election, in my opinion, she single-handedly won Georgia for Biden, Ossoff, and Warnock, stimulating the GOP white supremacists to react with these absurd voter suppression laws, encourage you for the future, or are you more outraged by how the Democratic Party has ignored the debt they owe African Americans, especially women, or is it both? I think that's an excellent question, by the way.
It's not really a question, it's a statement, because that's just a statement. Somebody's putting their views out there. This is what I would say.
Yeah.
Based on what we were just saying. Every white person who considers themselves an ally needs to be up in arms about these voter suppression laws. You need to be on the news, on the paper, the Wall Street Journal. You need to be online. Every white person who considers themselves not to be a racist needs to be in the street, naked, if necessary, about these voter suppression laws. We don't have to say it, because until America says America is a racist society and the vote is the way we keep it going on, until we can say that, it's not going to be here. It's not going to be here.
Iyanla, that was incredibly great. Anyone want to jump in there as well?
I just want to talk about this whole idea of saviorship, right? Like that person just made a comment saying that Stacey Abrams single-handedly delivered Georgia. There is no savior. She didn't single-handedly deliver Georgia. She talks about that because we like to put people on pedestals and make them prophets. It took a whole lot of folks to make that happen. It took a whole lot of years to make that happen, right? She talks about how this was 10 years in the making, right? She talks about how she was able to accomplish this on the backs and next to the shoulders of other Black women. So Stacey Abrams didn't single-handedly deliver Georgia. And I think it plays into this myth of like Black women being magical and superhuman, right? Which consistently dehumanizes us and take away our humanity, right? Stacey Abrams is fighting for a world where everybody has dignity and care. And that is the same mantra and intention that most Black folks, if not all Black folks and people of color are also fighting for. So Stacey Abrams didn't single-handedly do this. There's nothing magical about Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams has an intention, she has a vision, and she's very clear on that. And so do so many other Black folks that was side by side with her in Georgia and across the country, fighting for the liberation of all folks.
Great way to end the evening. Before we say goodnight to all of you, just a few closing remarks. Let's see, we should get a slide up there, Shervin. There we go, at some point. The International Short Film Competition, the 8th annual one that FOLCS hosts. These are films on racial and social justice sent from all over the world, 20 minutes or less in any genre. It's one of our most popular programs. We really do get films from all over the world. And then we hand out the FOLCS Award. And even though we're doing it virtually this year, we have a red carpet and we're going to hand out, we have special celebrity judges that'll be handing out the FOLCS in various categories. On March 8th, the FOLCS Awards night is April 8th. On March 9th, you can go on our FOLCS website and get all the information. The first week of April, you can screen the final 8 or 9 films, the finalist films. So you'll be ready to vote on audience favorite. And so show up. It's one of those really fun things we do. As you know, we're a nonprofit. We haven't charged since the pandemic. If you can donate to FOLCS, we'd appreciate it. Either through, you can text it, or you can do it through the website. If you haven't yet signed up for our email list, please do that. See this film. Find a way to see this film. Tell people about this. You can watch it on OWN. You can watch it on OWN's app. Again, it'll change you. And as you can see, this was a remarkable conversation by 5 remarkable women who really taught me a lot and did it with such great grace and dignity and graciousness. Thank you. So I want to say good night to Oge and to Tina and to Victoria and to Joy and to Iyanla. And thank you all and hope to see you at some of our, check us out. We've got more events coming up. And this is Thane Rosenbaum for FOLCS. Good night, everyone. Thank you.